And welcome to tonight's edition of the One Hood Power Hour. I am your co-host, Kahari Mosley, here with my esteemed colleagues once again, Miracle Jones and Ryan White. And it is the last Monday of the month. And on the last Monday of the month, we always have our legislative visits where we have our virtual trips to the state capitol to talk to state lawmakers about important policy and important legislation. And over the course of this month, we've been talking a lot about community safety, and tonight is not any different. We are going to be talking to two Pennsylvania state legislators about current legislation around criminal justice reform, community safety, as well as other efforts that folks are making in their local communities to address the rising violence that's happening not only here in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania, but also at a historic level in our brother city of Philadelphia. And we have two representatives who will be joining us later in the hour, State Rep. Almond Brown and State Rep. Regina Young. We look forward to talking to them directly about the work that they're doing in Philadelphia to address what some is going to say the most violent year in 6 decades in that city. And Pittsburgh kind of lagged behind as the uptick started during the pandemic last year, but this year, Pittsburgh has definitely been at the center of a number of incidents we saw over the weekend. On the South Side, there was another incident that made national news, another shooting. So, we're going to be talking about this very, challenging dilemma between how do we hold those who commit crimes accountable, while we also try to promote criminal justice reform and those who, want to find alternatives to incarceration or other types of restorative justice principles. So we very look forward to that conversation. But before we get into that, we're going to do, our general round robin of hot takes and important issues. So let's start with Miracle, and we'll go around the horn.
Yes, like you said, there's a lot of conversation going on nationally. We know last week Ryan brought up the Frito workers strike and the Frito-Lay workers strike that was happening. And today they basically announced a similarly, well, not today, but over the weekend they announced like a resolution to the strike that will now permit some of the workers to have at least a day off. Instead of working 7 days, 12-hour shifts straight. And so when we're talking about the rising COVID cases, we're talking about vaccine hesitancy, we also have to be mindful that there are a lot of working class people who do not have access to the vaccine because they are literally having to work 12 hours a day for multiple days at a time. And then they don't have, sick leave or leave saved up so that if they get sick or have a negative reaction, that they will be okay to miss work. So we also have to be mindful of that as we talk about, vaccines and these rising COVID cases. We've seen an increase in deaths from COVID here in Southwest PA. And so there is, again, this need as we are looking at not only the racial disparities, but also the possibility of another lockdown in the next few weeks or by the end of the year, that we ensure that people are getting the information that they need about the vaccines, that they need about the treatments, that they still need to wear their mask or regardless if they're vaccinated or not. And, Dr. Fauci did come out and say the CDC is possibly, reversing course again and saying everyone needs to wear their mask, whether or not they are vaccinated. So COVID-19 is still here to stay. And we need to make sure that not only are working class people who are disabled, we also can't forget the people who are in prisons and jails who are also going to be susceptible again to this new Delta Lambda variant. So it's very important that we are mindful of that going forward.
Thank you, Miracle. Ryan?
Yeah, thanks, Kahari. And thanks, Miracle, for covering that. And in that continuing trend, that we saw that Frito-Lay situation play a part in, of strikes. Obviously, that was a more major example, but of strikes, of workers walking out of businesses, of supposed staffing shortages. We saw a much smaller example of that in Pittsburgh yesterday, with the infamous, formerly fake, now real Burger King on the South Side. Supposedly, all the workers during a shift, including the manager, walked out all at the same time. I don't think it's clear what the exact reasoning was yet. But, if it's to assume that it's maintaining with the current trend we've seen with that nationwide, it's likely related to wages, to the work environment, to the hours, to the benefits. So, just as a public service announcement to all the, corporations and businesses out there, if you're worried about a staffing shortage, then the economically sensible thing to do is to provide, more competitive pay, benefits, hours, work environment. It's really that simple. That's, how we saw the Frito-Lay situation just get resolved, with them being granted, that extra day. So there was that. Miracle, you pretty much covered, everything with the Delta variant and COVID already. But we're also seeing the continued public health crisis and epidemic related to overdose deaths in Pennsylvania. The CDC just released their data from 2020, showing that there was a 16% increase in overdose deaths in Pennsylvania between 2019 and 2020, and a 29% increase nationwide. And we're seeing even higher numbers, in this year, in 2021, as related to last year. So that's yet another continuing public health crisis that's again exacerbated by COVID-19 as well, that we also need to be focused on and addressing.
Thanks for that, Ryan. And and again, back to the topic of health. We're seeing around the country with the Delta variant, the COVID numbers are going up, as well as the number of breakthrough cases of fully vaccinated people testing positive. By and large, the folks that are testing, positive. Generally are folks who are, working the kind of job where they're tested regularly, and many of those are asymptomatic, but there are folks coming into the hospital, with COVID symptoms who are fully vaccinated. But generally around the country, I believe it's in the high 90 percentile, 98, 99% of people in the hospital in this country right now are folks who are unvaccinated. And there was a very poignant story from a doctor from Alabama, talking about some young people, and it's mainly people right now between, I think, 20 and 40 are the folks who are getting sick right now. And folks are, really sick, getting put on ventilators, not sure if they're going to get out of the hospital. And then that's usually when they ask, if they can get the vaccine. And, at that point, it's too late, in the process. So it's a pretty, perilous situation in many states, that many of those that are under 50%, vaccination, and what you're seeing actually is, Republican governors around the country who have been, hesitant to promote, vaccination, and saying folks that kind of have their own choice have gotten very aggressive. I know this morning, the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, is also a 2024 presidential hopeful, really started to push the importance of getting vaccinated, as well as the governor of Alabama. I believe Governor Ivey, if I'm not mistaken, also basically blamed the uptick on unvaccinated people, which was a pretty stunning, statement, particularly coming, from the state that appears to be the most vaccine hesitant, in the country right now. And right now, the United States is in a situation where it's really, the only country, that basically has an oversupply of vaccine, and then has, I think, the second highest hesitant population in the world other than Russia. So I think the two most vaccine hesitant populations in the world right now are Russia and the United States. And the only difference is the United States, has an oversupply of vaccines. So there's countries all over the world where COVID is raging right now, and they would love to get their hands on the vaccines that we have sitting, in cold chain, as well as in freezers. So really, really, interesting. It's State House news. Did want to mention an unfortunate State House news. State Rep Margot Davidson resigned last week amidst allegations from Attorney General Shapiro about misuse of campaign and government funds. As always, people are innocent until proven guilty. So we will continue to follow that. But that's unfortunate. I know Representative Davidson personally, and always thought she was a good person. So I hope the best for her, the best for our constituents, and whatever the situation is, hopefully is worked out, and justice prevails. So I did want to mention that, as well as President Biden will be back in Pennsylvania in the Lehigh Valley this week. So making another return to Pennsylvania. So as usual, Pennsylvania is a very popular state for presidential candidates as well as sitting presidents. And it appears, as much as, the world has changed over the last 2 years, that's one thing that doesn't seem to change, is that Pennsylvania is very popular for people at the presidential political level. So that's our round of hot takes. I'm going to pass it over to Ryan to give some context and some background on tonight's legislative visit. Thanks so much for your background work and pulling this together. And without any further ado, Ryan White.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kahari. So, as mentioned at the onset of the episode, we're continuing on both with our series of legislative visits during the last power hour of every month. And we're also continuing on with this month's focus on community safety, ranging from a number of topics from violence prevention to, proper resources and funding for a number of different things. So again, we're joined tonight by two state representatives who are, working diligently on those issues. Both out of Philadelphia. We have first, who's going to be joining us now, Representative Regina Young, and we'll also be joined later by Representative Almond Brown.
Welcome to the Power Hour.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Ron, do you want to start with the first question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kahari. Thank you, Representative Young, for joining us. So just to open things up, I just wanted to ask, about your general perspective as, what you see as currently being some of the biggest threats to, overall community safety, whether that be specifically in your district, in Philadelphia, or statewide.
So I will say my background, just a little history. I am a former educator, a social worker, and I'm certified grief counselor and HIV counselor. And so most of the things that my lens is from that lane. And I'm always going to say that we need to not only inform people of not only their strengths and challenges, but also empower people with the tools they need to help this entire situation. I believe the people, whether you're at the community level or if you're at the business level or even the legislative level, this world is comprised of people with different opinions and perspectives. And I really don't think we do enough messaging to ensure that the agenda of the people to help promote positivity in these communities are met. So I will say the people and the messaging is our biggest threats.
Thank you so much. And I'm not going to do a macro meso question because I'm also a MSW and the school of social work. But I want you were talked about recently about the need for like investment for like families and support for resources have been really amplifying the child care tax credit that's been rolling out for the past couple of weeks. How do you see community investment going to address issues in areas of safety in your district?
So two things. I heard the tax credit that is coming down not only from the federal to the state, but to the municipalities. I believe that those funds are definitely needed. The next piece would be to whom and how. So as the dollars are funneling through the different communities and the district, I know that we are providing extra dollars for families, and we can say there are food deserts. We can say that families need dollars. We can say that there is an opportunity to reinvest back into our economy. So the legislator in me will say this is a good thing simply because it's an opportunity for families to reinvest back into the economy and ensure that we are viable and we're taking care of our households and our community. However, from the lens of a community advocate and a parent and a someone who is going into these stores, you just said that there are stores that are closing down because of healthcare, and there's a lot of stores and businesses that are not functioning because they are, the staff isn't there to service the people, so the businesses have to close. And I'm not talking about just the big mom and pop, I mean the big institutions, but I'm also talking about the mom and pop. So there is a lot of pieces to this puzzle that we have to fix. As a collective, we have to identify ways in which we can invest the dollars in a meaningful and an educated way. If you're giving people money without a clear, and I'm not saying we need to micromanage how the dollars are spent, but to some degree we need to educate and present a messaging package as to how these dollars can better serve not only the households but the community. And I will say that we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do as various stakeholders. We have a lot of work to do as legislators.
Thank you so much for that. I want to jump quickly to politics, and one, congratulate you. For your big win last year. I know this is your first year as a legislator. So, what are some of the experiences that you've had in your short time in Harrisburg, and talk a little bit about your historic race. I remember reading, some articles about, how you didn't raise a lot of money. You didn't have a bunch of big endorsements. You didn't have the fancy Twitter and Facebook operation. You just had a bunch of volunteers and a lot of shoe leather. So just talk a little bit, about, your journey to the State House and what has it been like since taking office in January.
So thank you. I haven't heard that question in quite some time, but I will say that it's a journey. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I knew what I was walking into. I'll say that. I thought I was walking into an entire system where people mainly had it figured out and mainly worked together and mainly worked in a collaborative way for the betterment of either the party or the district. So my perspective, and coming from an organizer background, I will say that I'm not familiar with this space in politics, so I'm learning. But even in my quick learning journey in the 7 months I've been here, I will 110% continue on with my advocacy lane. I've learned that, to your point, I did not have a lot of endorsements. I had no endorsements. What do you mean a lot? I had none. I had no endorsements. I had no money. And I pretty much did not focus on the noise of who people thought I needed to talk to. Because as an organizer living in an urban community right here in Southwest Philadelphia, I realized that there's so much amazing energy and resources right here in the people who were oftentimes discounted or discredited. So I went to what I know. And one of the reasons why I advocate so much for the heart of community is because we have to stop allowing others to count the people who live in urbanized communities out. They have the power. And in my opinion, they have far too often ascribed to their limitations that other people impose on them. And so I do believe I champion my work to this seat, and then while I'm in this seat, and making sure that I'm always messaging how we need to equip and empower the people who were once discounted, and we need to stop focusing on the economic value that someone believed they possess, or the educational structure that someone believed that they needed in order to sit at such a table. I'm here to remind everybody, it doesn't matter what you have, you can use it, and you can use it for the betterment of the community in your neighborhood, but ultimately where you live. You can make an impact on this system in such a way that nobody else can. We all bring a uniqueness to this table, and we have to stop allowing those people who were once discounted from being at the table. And so, to your question, hopefully I'll answer it, and that is, I want to make sure that when people see Regina, the mother, the wife, the brown child who come from a dysfunctional family, who live right here in what they call shoot 'em up Southwest. I live right where I legislate real time. So I'm not going to be at the table silence when someone said, well, you know what, let's just wait for the next administration, or let's just wait to see who buys into what we're selling. No, we start with the people we have right here, and you get your neighbors, you get those people at your table, knocking on your doors. To your point, I had all volunteers. Why did I have all volunteers? Because I invest in people. If we as legislators start remembering the value of the people who we say we want to serve, we can all do greater things.
Thank you for that, Ryan.
Yep, thanks, Kahari. And so, in the overarching topic of safety, one of the issues that, we haven't discussed as directly, as substantially this month is access to healthcare. And recently you were involved in a policy hearing that was focused on, discussing ways to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. And so if you could just talk about that briefly, what some of the potential ideas proposed were, and what drove you to take up that issue.
So once again, I represent a community that, and a group of people who were once counted out or left off of the left out of the planning of the entree when they were planning what should happen in our communities. And so what really prompted my work is because I talked to far too many seniors and far too many people with health ailments who are not able to get the medicine that they need because of insurance and the way our structures are set up. We have to fix that. To your question, Ryan, I don't have any takeaways from that policy hearing. I have to be honest. I heard a lot of talk. I heard a lot of conversation. I heard a lot of upset people with some real passion perspective, but I did not hear any real time solutions. Now they could have said it. I didn't hear it. But I do applaud the testifiers. I do applaud those people who are interested in making the system work a little better. I asked a question about third party discount organizations, and someone did say, well, you know what? It shouldn't come from them. It should come from our government. I'm gonna be honest with you, Ryan. I don't know the outcome, but I'm so eager to figure out ways that we can build an outcome. I haven't heard it, but I know something could be done. This isn't popular, I know that, but I am a component of universal health care. I really do like universal health care because it erases most of these problems. But we are a capitalistic society, and so I know that's going to be a uphill battle to sell. But I do believe universal health care can help, again, get to the needs of the people. If our health ailments, is a deterrent to why things can't happen, as an organizer, my thought is let's fix it. But it's not as simple. So I have to build to that solution.
Thank you so much. And I know this past weekend there were rallies all over with Medicare for All talking about, it being a public health situation. And when we're talking about whether it's capitalism or these systems that are impacting the people in your district, what are some of the ways that you are trying to make sure that the people, the other legislators in Harrisburg are able to hear from your community members? Right now, we're still in this global pandemic, and we've been, doing Zooming, different type of organizing, so that a lot of legislators think for the first time they've learned about various issues. So what do you see going forward as we're returning from the summer session, ways and inroads so that more people from the community can actually be, at the table and not on the menu?
So I didn't even know it was summer, actually. I work all of the time. I wish it was 8 days in the week. Because listen, I serve a community and we have not had an opportunity to exhale because of epidemic. We're always in crisis season. And so one of the things that I'm currently planning is something called a community conversation, where I am bringing first come, first serve. No more of that. If you know somebody who knows me, you can be a part of this conversation. That I don't run my administration that way. Everybody has access to Regina Young, because Regina Young is just a person, and we all need to understand that we are people really working hard to do the best we can. So I'm building a coalition called conversations, community conversations. And that's where I bring first come, first serve. We have community organizers. We have municipal elected. So that's in Philadelphia, that's our city council people. At the state legislator, it's me, the state rep, and then my state senator, who is Anthony Williams. And then I'm also inviting Nick Saval. So what I propose is we set up shop where we have these continual conversations to educate community members about the process of government. Once people become educated, they awaken, and then they start asking questions, and then they start advocating. So that's where you build your coalition. We could do a better job at educating people to empower them with the information that they need to help us be better informed when we're making those votes and when we're advocating for them in Harrisburg. So that's my plan of action in this short time. Now, it could be a bigger and better plan, but 7 months into this work, that's where I'm at.
And is there any specific, legislation that you're either championing or you're trying to make sure it doesn't pass that you want to put on our viewers' radar?
Oh yeah, so I'm on state government, and state government, as you know, is the committee that really talks about election reform and the gerrymandering, redistricting conversation. And so I literally today just put out a post all over social media encouraging people to call the majority leader in state government to let them know what you want to see in your community. So I know it's prredistricting.com is the website, and they're doing a tour. We just started our state government hearings last week. That's why I'm like, I don't even know it's summer because I'm always still in Harrisburg. But we started our hearings last week, and we're going to do a tour throughout the entire state. Let people know what you want. And I tell my constituents, talking to me isn't helping because I already know. Let's talk to the majority because it's their vote that carries. In state government, we always have 15-10, 15-10. So whatever the majority wants, that's what they get. So let's get our Democrats to contact the Republicans and say, I don't want what you're proposing. So that's one of them. So I will say, districting, redistricting, and election reform. That's something that I'm pushing. But personally, I am advocating for House Bill 1204 and House Bill 1205. House Bill 1204, briefly, is reestablishing the the Governor's School of Urban Teaching, where we have educators who are looking to go, who are in schools, different institutions, universities, or colleges, and they're looking to be teachers. I am proposing that they have a course in which they learn what urban school settings look like. So when they're in our schools, there's not a high turnover, or there's no shock effect where they quickly want to leave our schools and our kids can't form relationships because the teacher left. So I'm House Bill 1204, and then House Bill 1205 is compensation for the wrongfully convicted. I can elaborate, but I think my time was up.
Could you please elaborate on that, and then we'll go to Ryan and Miracle for the final question.
Okay, so House Bill 1205 is really around making sure that those people, there's a lot of bad things happening, a lot of brokenness that's happening around, not only in our Commonwealth, but around the world. Like, look, you don't have to go far to hear bad news. So House Bill 1205 is addressing the needs of those people who are wrongfully convicted, wrongfully incarcerated. We should compensate them. They lost out on their education. They lost out on some jobs. They lost out on some trainings. And in this bill, I am proposing that we, as the Commonwealth, help them be aligned with what they missed out on while we held them wrongfully. So I'm talking about, if they want to go back to school for their GED or high school diploma, do that. If they were in college and they had a couple of more semesters to go to get their degree, hey, let them go. We have to do our part with being civically minded. I ran on bringing humanity back to politics, humanity back to Harrisburg. So that's what I advocate for. Mental health, you know what that does to someone's psychological perspective? If they're like in jail for a day, imagine 10 years wrongfully convicted. What do we do with that? And then we say, well, we're going to just allow you to go ahead. No, we have to do our part in making sure that we are doing our best to at least addressing the mental, emotional, the physical health of those people who were wrong, who we wronged. And so that's what House Bill 1205 is.
Thank you so much for that breakdown, Ryan, Miracle. Who wants to take the final question for the illustrious Representative Young?
I'll let Ryan wrap it up for us.
Yep. Thanks, Miracle. So just, before we move on to our next guest, if you could real quick, just let everybody know how they can get in contact with you in your office, whether it be any constituent who wants to connect with you on a certain issue or anything along those lines.
So I'm so easy to find. It is Rep Young at pahouse.net. All my social media is Rep Young. So that's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I think I might be doing a TikTok. I'm not sure yet. I have to figure that out. But right now, I'm just on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And that's Rep Young at pahouse.net. And we respond to all community inquiries. One more thing I want to point out, because I know you're like, everybody's talking about giving back to the community. One of the things that I love about my office is I represent a vast district. Every last one of the people in my office are community people, and they represent a part of my district. Why did I do that? Because I want them to understand, even as we are getting stronger and tighter in addressing the needs of our community, they live in those communities too. So they will never let me forget what I said I was going to do. So I strategically have staffers who represent each part of my district for that reason.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And thank you again for joining us tonight, Representative Young. Really appreciate it. And we look forward to having you on here again in the future.
Thank you so much. And thank you again for the invite. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you once again, State Representative Regina Young, representing Southwest Philadelphia. Great conversation. So now we're going to go to our second guest of the evening, another freshman representative from the Philadelphia area, State Rep Almond Brown. Welcome. Welcome to the Power Hour.
Hey, how y'all doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So, Miracle, do you want to start off with the first question for Rep Brown?
Hi, Representative. How are you doing today? We appreciate you being in the car. You know, there's a lot of tech stuff happening. So we'll just talk about some of the things you've been considered freshman. You've been really out here hitting the ground, proposing a lot of legislation. What has been the motivating factor for you with pushing this legislation when we're looking at community involvement and safety?
Yeah, so first, and like you said, I've been pushing a lot of legislation. So you're exactly right, especially for a new member. You know, all of my legislation comes from and it starts in my community and what we face day to day. And when I say we, I mean everyone, whether it's currently happening or if it has happened in the past. So, like for example, I introduced House Bill 1669, and that is it's a piece of legislation to prohibit law enforcement from being deceitful to juveniles, and that was a personal thing to me, and it is something that I know that is impacting several young Black and brown men in my community, and when I speak to I speak over the years from all the community work and being involved directly in my community. These are conversations that were held, in reference to my son didn't know how to respond, or my son shouldn't be in there, or my son, he was, he said whatever he had to say to get out of there, and now, you have a lot of young men that are serving time for crimes that they didn't commit. So again, that is House Bill 1669. I also introduced another piece of legislation to eliminate the $5 copay for incarcerated folks. And we all know in the state of Pennsylvania, we currently have slightly over 38,000 inmates in our state institutions right now. And that piece of legislation came about because, again, like I said, it starts all in my community. I have several constituents and friends and family members who are currently incarcerated or who have been incarcerated, where this $5, even though it don't sound like a lot, it really, it separated families. I'll give one example that was given to me from someone that reached out when they heard that the legislation was introduced. A mother said that she hasn't spoken to her son in years due to the fact that she couldn't be there for him financially. She lost her job and she couldn't put money on his books, so that started her answering the phone less, or ignoring his phone calls because she couldn't give him the financial support that he needed. I also have another piece of legislation in reference to I'm sorry, a car was driving past. Well, like I said, all my legislation, it it starts in the community. So everything that I'm working on with my colleagues, it starts where the heart is, and it starts at home.
Brian, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kahari. Yeah, and so another piece of legislation that you had proposed this year is House Bill, I believe it was 1587,
Yes.
which deals with the sentencing guidelines for certain crimes, and so just to talk about what were your motivations behind that? Was it again focused on the community, and your own perspective? What were you hearing and seeing in your community that really drove you to take up that issue and to take that approach with it.
Yes. So again, it all starts at home and directly in my community and how we're impacted. So I have constituents who I sit down and have conversations with, and they tell me the stories. I don't want to be too long on this, but I had a constituent come to me who came to a stoop meeting, like a block by block town hall. And she came to me, she was about 80, in her early 80s. She came to the meeting at another constituent's home who hosted the community meeting. And she had I don't know if you're familiar with the little weed things that get stuck to your pants when you walk through like an alleyway or you walk through a field. And so she came in the meeting and I was like, Miss, you have something on your legs. And she said, yes, this is what happens when you have to leave out of the back of your home because she's scared to walk out the front door because of the violence and the guys that stand on the porches across the street. There's constantly shootings and drug deals going on. So for the last 3 years, she's been using her back door, and she got to walk through the alleyway every single time she wants to leave her home. And there's multiple stories that I get from my constituents about how they can't patronize local small businesses, how they can't sit on their porches because at any given time of day, there can be a shooting. And in Philadelphia, we are well over 300 murders right now. We're at 300, and that's the problem. And it's only getting hotter. Things might, and prayerfully it doesn't, but things might only get worse. Excuse me. So one more story about my community meetings. I had a disabled senior that came multiple blocks to my senior building in a wheelchair. To my community meeting in a wheelchair, and she went last. And she said while she attended, and it was because early June, she was on the porch with her grandson getting some fresh air. And she went inside because it was about to get dark. And she said within 20 seconds, multiple gunshots right outside her home. She made it back outside to see what was going on. And her grandson was shot 9 times. He is currently still in critical condition. He can't walk. He has the bag, the tube to eat, and the whole nine. And he was 18 years old, right outside her door. So it is real. We have real issues going on, and we need accountability.
No insurance talk on beach day.
And we need to install accountability, because there is a small population of repeat offender of violent crime that they're bucking the system. They're lawless. They feel as though if they commit a crime, there's a high chance that they'll get away with it. So we need all hands on deck. We need every level of government. We need every community group, every community organization, everyone to all come together to solve this problem. And I really believe we can do that.
Thank you for that. And I did have a follow-up questions if that's okay with y'all. Yeah. So thank you for recounting those stories. It's a really, really devastating issue. I think everyone's in agreement. That something has to get done about it, and urgently. I just wanted to talk about your specific legislation again. I mentioned there's been a lot of controversy around it earlier. And a lot of those critiques have been rooted in the idea that mandatory minimum sentencing, it's rooted really in that tough on crime philosophy, that a lot of studies have discredited, both in its effectiveness in reducing crime and recidivism and violence, and also, shown to perpetuate and exacerbate racial disparities in, different facets of the criminal justice system. So I was wondering if there was just, outside of your community, which you've already discussed, if there was any studies or other applications of this type of sentencing, that you believe showed success, or showed some sort of model to successfully apply this system, that you relied on as a foundation in drafting this legislation.
Yes, yeah, I depended on personal. I have, growing up in my community, being raised on 56 and Market, we don't, and I'm saying we, as in people from my community, we didn't travel to New Jersey, which is very easy to do, living in Philadelphia. We did not travel to New Jersey with guns and drugs, because we knew if you got caught in New Jersey, which is only a few minutes away from Philly, especially from West Philly, there was a hefty consequence over there. So crimes didn't get, and they still to this day don't get committed as much as they do in Philadelphia. And if you're familiar with where West Philly or Philadelphia is positioned before you cross into Montgomery County, which is also on the other side of my district, we don't even cross the street and commit crimes in Montgomery County, because we know that there's a hefty consequence, and they don't have crime. They don't even have burglaries across the street from West Philadelphia. So, it's like, when do we ask the question, why is it okay that we commit these violent crimes in our own communities and we don't cross the street and do the same things? There's something missing.
Thank you for that. And one of the questions when we're talking about accountability, one of the things that a lot of people were not understanding was the part of the legislation to deny parole, right? So a lot of the argument is we send people to prisons and jails to reform, to help rehabilitate, for the purpose of them coming back home and being changed. So why do you feel that taking away a parole eligibility sends a message with a tougher on crime stance?
I'm sorry, you might have to repeat the last little bit. It was choppy.
I apologize. So part of some of the legislation was also about the parole eligibility when it comes to committing acts of gun violence and crime. Why did you feel like that was such an important conversation to add? When in a lot of times we will say, hey, reformers will advocate for prisons and jails as a means for people to change their behavior, improve their reentry to society. So why is parole on the table in this conversation?
Yeah, so it's not parole. It was denied bail. It was bail. So I believe that is important. Well, that piece was added because when things happen in these communities across the Commonwealth, you have people who are committing these violent crimes, and just say, for example, well, this is factual. What's going on in communities with violent offenders? Their street credit means more to them than anything right now. So if I commit a violent crime and I attempt to murder my quote unquote opposition and I fail, he might get shot a few times and I fail to do so, and then I get caught. If I get back out, by any means necessary, I'm going to go finish the job. And that's when you have large crowds of people getting shot. On July 4th, in my district, there was a July 4th event, barbecue, for a young self-made entrepreneur. He was 23 years old. Someone shot 108 rounds into a crowd of 80 plus people just to get him. just to get him. And unfortunately and sadly, 2 people died that night. And then 2 days later, because they weren't satisfied, 2 days later, after the memorial service, they went to his house and shot up the porch where his children's mother lived, and his family was there. They shot 4 more people, and it was 5 blocks away from the crime scene from 2 nights prior. That's what we're dealing with. And that's why we need accountability. So when you have someone with that mindset, that needs to be addressed properly. And they should not be given bail if they are the possible person who did the shooting. Because like I said, if they get out, they're going to finish the job if they did not succeed. Because again, their street credit means more to them. And yes, in reference to parole, I support parole in all in programs and things in that nature. I'm all for that. But that's what we're dealing with out here these days.
Kari, you had a question?
Yeah. So there's groups out there like the Abolitionist Law Center, the ACLU, who have taken, very, strong stances, in opposition, to your legislation. So how do you, reconcile, the need, for accountability, for offenders, for violent offenders, because we're trying to balance like this issue, obviously, between, trying to not repeat the mistakes of the 80s and 90s of, mass incarceration, while also, have empathy for victims of violent crime, as well as, to promote, overall, community safety. So how do you, reconcile, the need, and I'm sure there's a very emotional, call from the community, to bring, a sense of order, a sense of safety to the community. But how do you reconcile that, with, studies and research over the years that have shown that, over time, this particular approach, may not, serve, the result of, lowering crime, so, how do you reconcile that? Is there something else that you see, with this policy that other folks who have looked at it over the years, haven't looked at that makes you, want to focus, on this particular thing? And not saying you're only focusing on this is the only solution, but obviously this is what, the solution has been in the media the most.
Yeah. So the bill is currently on hold. It is not on the calendar for the upcoming session. And I'm looking forward to meeting face to face with all the organizations who want to give me their input. And I'm not sold firmly on mandatory minimums. I'm not. I'm sold firmly on accountability. And that's what it is. Like I said, these guys need to be held accountable for their actions. I was raised that way, and I'm from the same streets that these guys are from. I am a victim of gun violence. I've been around all the wildest things that you can imagine. But what we're experiencing right now, over beefs over social media posts, rapping about someone, and I had a group of young guys tell me, I'm like, when is this going to end? One guy, and he was about 17, he said, "Oh, head, when we all effing die." And it's over social media beefs, the current music, and the people that they want to be like. And my question is, how do we combat that? There's several jobs available right now. There's currently multiple tens of thousands of jobs available on CareerLink. There's programs that I support wholeheartedly, and that I volunteer and I help bring funding to programs. I support all of those things, but I also support accountability. And the prayer is that when and if these people who commit these violent crimes, that if they are convicted, then they go to a facility where they can receive everything that they need to become a better person. So when they are released, they aren't the same as they went in. I've been visiting SCIs. I've been talking to inmates, talking to staff, talking to the people who run programs. I think very highly of SCI Chester. They have great programs in there. They teach the trades. They have barbering. If you have, if you walk around the prison, all the walls are beautifully painted by the inmates. They give you pets in prison in SCI Chester. So the whole thing, my intent is not to hurt my people. My community, they know me, and they know that I would never do any of that. That's why I'm here today. I didn't have the party support. I had the community support, and I had the power of the people behind me. And it's only going to get stronger because we're working together. I stand with my community, and I'm never going to not stand with them. And if my community felt as though I wasn't for them, then they would definitely let me know, because I have a large senior population. So they know where my heart is.
Yeah, and as a freshman representative, you've been able to work across the aisle. You've been able to bring people together to do a lot of proposals. Do you see a room for like innovative solutions where we're talking about ways to create better interventions? You're already having conversations with people who are in the life. Do you see more of an opportunity to do that now?
So it was kind of choppy. Was your question working across the aisle, seeing more opportunity to get things done?
Yes, but not only just with other people in the party, but people in the community, right? You're a freshman representative. You are not, all this political legacy. And so when we're talking about building power and reasons to build power, it is to create better, innovative solutions for people, bring them into, to these tables. So do you see more of an opportunity now that this bill is on hold to actually start to be building and finding better ways to address the issues that are impacting your community?
Yes. So I'm a firm believer in relationships and building bridges, and working across the aisle to solve problems. And like I said in the beginning, it's going to take all of us, and we're going to have to approach some things differently. I appreciate all the work that has been being done over the years, and the people before me, they laid the groundwork, and they have some big shoes to fill. But times are changing every single hour. It's going like I said, it's going to take all of us. And it was kind of, I'm trying to like get your whole question. It was choppy. I'm trying to fill it in. Could somebody else repeat it if they could hear it? I want to make sure I answer thoroughly.
Yeah, I think that if you can hear me, I think the question was, obviously, just to give folks, update, on the legislation, it has been put on hold. It did, from what I understand, make it through committee. And then you requested, because some of the feedback that you received, to put the bill on hold. And as the sponsor, the committee chair, held the bill. And I think the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, Miracle, was that given the kind of the new kind of lease on life that has been given with the pause, do you see that pause as an opportunity? And you even said in your own words that, you treated in some ways the piece of legislation that you offered up as a conversation starter, to kind of start a conversation, in the midst, of a year with a lot of violence. So did you see, so, in this interim period, what do you, want to do with this time, as far as to reach out to more people,
Mhm.
to get more consensus, to maybe potentially come up with a different sort of legislative vehicle
Yes.
to meet your goals?
Yes, yes. And so, with this pause and this hold, I'm expecting to, like I said, sit down with as many people as I can, so they can fully understand, for one, understand where I'm coming from, and that this is not something that I was told to do by anybody or by any other party. This is something that, you know, that came from, like I said in the beginning, from my community. Everything starts there. And in reference to, the part of the question about, building relationships and working together, the relationships that I've been able to build, and me introducing my community to the people that, I'm trying to build with. So just like Representative Young said, you know, um, they need to hear from the people. They don't need they don't always need to hear just from the representative. And one great example of that was when I got the I got the owner of the Eagle Arms gun show to stop allowing the sales of these ghost gun kits at his shows. And what happened to get that done was I showed him the facts of what's happening in my community, and and that these firearms are showing up on 2 out of 3 crime scenes in my direct district, and that these things are a problem. And the way I packaged it, it didn't just come from me. I showed him the statements of the families and the victims that were being impacted by what he was being allowed, what he was allowing to be sold at his gun shows. And this guy, and he's a very nice guy. He would have 42 weekends, 42 gun shows a year, and one gun show is, one weekend is 3 gun shows. So you do 42 times 3. That's how many shows this guy had every single year. And so after him and I built a relationship, mind you, he's from nowhere near Philadelphia. After him and I built a relationship, I was able to kindly ask him, can you do something different? And he came back and said, you know what, like, this is, no one has ever packaged it to me like this. Something needs to be done, and something can be done. And effective immediately, he sent out a mass email to all of his vendors that he allowed to sell at his shows, and said that he would no longer allow these polymer 80 ghost gun kits to be sold at his shows. And I witnessed myself. I went to the shows several times, and I would see men who looked just like me walk in and walk out with bags and bags of these kits. And so after he stopped the sales, I would still go to the shows, and I would see men who looked just like me walk in and walk out empty handed. That happened from building relationships and bringing my community and having them be a part of the conversation. And so, you know, coming up, I have public safety town halls. I have, weekly community meetings, and it's all open. And it's for me to be a representative that listens to my community. Not someone who tells his community or her community what they need. It's me listening and understanding what we need and making sure that I'm not just making the wrong decisions, and that my actions are community driven, and that my community is fully on board. So coming up in the near future, I do plan to host a roundtable with community leaders, elected officials from the city, state, and federal level, and organizations, so we can have a complete, transparent discussion on solutions and action steps.
Thanks for that. I have a quick question, and then we're gonna go to Ryan. Recently, we had a youth summit here in Western Pennsylvania with some young people. One of the things that came up constantly was the lack of resources. I know recently, there's been a larger conversation even beyond your legislation at the city level, with Mayor Kinney, about resources going into the community. Beyond law enforcement, beyond incarceration, around prevention. So what types of investments would you like to see, particularly talking about like these young people that you come in contact with, what would you think would be the best investments that we can make around prevention, particularly in Philadelphia, but also statewide?
Yeah, I would like to see more investment in after school programs, open our rec centers, fully staff our rec centers. When I was young, and I came up working in after school programs and summer camps, I can't tell you that I remember one news story where a child was shot. We knew where our children were before school and after school, and they had things to do. They weren't roaming the streets. They weren't walking home by themselves. The schools were fully staffed, to where when you dropped your kid off in the morning, they're not just sitting in the parking lot waiting for the doors to open. These are actual issues that we face every single day. There's no reason in the world that a parent who needs to arrive at work at 8 a.m. drops their child off in a school parking lot at 7 a.m. or 7:15 a.m. and there's no staff or there's no one attending to their children. Why are the doors locked? Let them children in, have some before and after care programs so we know that them children are safe. We have another issue in Philadelphia. We have women and children missing every single day. That's a problem. When are we going to start talking about these things and sitting down and figuring out solutions and finding out where the problems are stemming from and how we can make people's lives better? So I would like to see investments in before and after care programs, more staffing, and let's open these rec centers. We have hundreds of millions of dollars being invested in these rec centers, and we have invested way before COVID. And a lot of these rec centers in Philadelphia are still closed. And when we reach out to ask why, they say, "Oh, we don't have a budget for staffing." But then we look at the facts. They just spent $12 million on a renovation, and the building is closed. That's a problem. So we need to figure out who's sitting at the table making these decisions, and who's involved in these budget deals and getting things done.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And then I did just have one more quick question about the language and potential consequences of that House Bill 1587.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned earlier in the segment, and you've spoken on this a couple other times, that the bill is intended to be targeted at small number of particularly violent people who, I believe you've described it as terrorizing the community. But regardless, just a specific, especially violent group of people in the community. And correct me if I'm misreading any of the legislation. But from the language of the bill, it looks like these mandatory minimum would be applied to, anybody with a previous felony conviction who's found to be in possession of a firearm, regardless of whether those prior convictions were violent or nonviolent, and regardless of, whether or not they had been charged with using that firearm in any sort of violent act. So, my question would be, do you have any reservations about, casting too wide of a net with that piece of legislation? Given that it's intended to target a smaller, especially violent group of people, but there's a lot of scenarios you can imagine out of that, where again, somebody who doesn't have any sort of violent history, who may have a nonviolent felony and has a firearm for, illegally, of course, but for self-defense or for any other number of reasons, would get caught up in that mandatory minimum sentencing guideline. And, we would see again, that issue of mass incarceration come into play from that.
Yes. So, I get the hesitation around implementation. So that's why we're in the beginning of a process. And that's why we have this whole system in place to make things better if people don't agree on certain parts of the language. But the bill would be intended for repeat offenders of violent crime. And I know it's 8 pages now. It's a lot in there. But there's going to be some push and pull on both sides of the aisle. So the bill is intended for repeat offenders of violent crime with a 5-year look back. So only if you committed a violent crime or charged and committed and convicted of a violent crime within the last 5 years, and then if you actively caught committing another violent crime for that involved firearms, for example. And I said this when everything was getting drafted. I'm not intending for someone who lives in a community like I live in, who needs a gun for protection, but with no ill intent. It's only going to be intended for repeat offenders of violent crime when you've actively committed multiple and been convicted of multiple starting up 5 years prior. And then there's a sunset in there. Did you read that part? Yeah, so the sunset, the bill would expire in 4 years for the simple fact that there's an increase of violent crime all over the state, but especially in Philadelphia. Like I mentioned earlier, we're at 300 and something murders. We now have statistics from police captains who are putting out publicly the stats of violent offenders in Philadelphia. For example, you have one police captain who said just in 2019, in his police district where approximately 120,000 people live, 126 violent offenders who were caught shooting and caught with the gun in their possession in 2019. None of them are currently serving any state time out of 126. In 2020, in the same police district, there was 179 violent offenders who got caught with the firearm during the commission of a crime. No one knows the status of those cases, and a high percentage of those people are right back out on the street. And what do you think they're doing? The mayor just gave a statement at a press conference. Since January 1st, there's 1,523 open VUFA cases. And for those who don't know what VUFA is violating the Uniform Firearms Act, and caught with the gun. And a lot of those guys are right back out on the street. That's a problem. So my question is always, when are we going to stand with our law-abiding citizens? When are we going to stand with the victims? When are we going to stand with the seniors who want to sit on their porches? When are we going to stand with the children who want to play at a playground without being shot? When are we going to stand with the fathers who want to spend time with their kids, and they want to walk up the street because they don't have a vehicle to a playground, and it's all taped off because there was just a murder in broad daylight the day before? This is what we're going through in my community and communities similar across the Commonwealth. And it's not only happening in Philadelphia. So my intent is to, with the legislation, and I know a lot of people are saying that there's a broad approach. That's not my intention. My intention is to focus on a targeted population, which is a small number of repeat violent offender, and hold them accountable. After a conversation with another police captain, he said this piece of legislation, from what I'm looking to do, just in his police district, out of 120,000 residents, only about 40 to 60 people it will impact. And those are the repeat violent offenders. It's the same people doing the same thing. Everyone is not the shooter. When I was growing up, if it was 10 of us, maybe 1.5 or 2 at the most were willing to shoot. So that's what we're looking to accomplish. We're not, I'm not looking to increase the incarceration numbers for minor offenses and things of that nature. And the bill was kind of drafted following the guidelines of DUI. If you are caught driving under the influence, what happens? If you are caught driving twice under the influence, what happens? You get mandatory 5 years for just getting caught driving, and even if you don't hit anybody. The sentencing guidelines increase with, depending on the severity and how many offenses you have. It's similar here. Do we take driving under the influence more serious than we do violent criminals that involve firearms? That's a question that I would like answered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And I think, as I said, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on the show. It's just to understand the background, because I think that with all the work and the conversation around Pennsylvania, and hearing mandatory minimums was just, I think, a shock to a lot of folks, and not necessarily understanding, sometimes you introduce legislation with the hope of bringing people to the table. And it seems like that is a lot of your intent. And so there is room for partnerships and engaging. So I do want to thank you so much for, like I said, coming in. And I know there are a lot of conversations still going to be continuing, and it is, robust conversation. So I do, again, thank you for coming on. But I did want to switch a little bit, because you talked a lot about senior citizens in your district. Over the year, Pennsylvania has been in the news for a lot of our elderly population, for their housing, for their health care. And just last week, the Wolf administration talked about, some new proposals with making sure that seniors were getting support at, their living facilities. That's also come under fire. Have the seniors in your district been reaching out in regards to this? We're still in COVID-19. A lot of the elderly populations were hit the hardest, with the past COVID, and now we have this new variant, and a lot of our elders are still at risk. So what are you hearing from the people in your district in regards to this matter?
Yeah, so my district entails 21 senior facilities, which include high-rise buildings that might be, assisted living, or, seniors who live alone and who function fine. Unfortunately and sadly, me being so close to my constituents, I've lost dozens of seniors that I knew personally. So it definitely did, hit home for me. And so, yes, they are reaching out about their living conditions and how they're being treated and how they just want better quality of life. And that's one of the things that I ran on, was making sure these property owners, these businesses are also held accountable for mistreating my senior citizens. Well, I like to call them seasoned citizens. But, so yes, I do get the complaints. I actually was at a facility today about a senior building not having hot water, and some of the air conditioning units were down, depending on where you lived in the building. So the quality of life for my seasoned citizens is always going to be top priority for me, and I do sit on the aging committee, and that is a committee that I handpicked due to the fact that my district encompasses so many seniors. So yes, we are getting the complaints, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure the quality of life is better for them.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us. And be willing, to answer some tough questions. I know it's been very controversial. You've had opponents and supporters outside of your office. I understand, your district office has been quite the location in Philadelphia for spirited, citizen involvement, I'll say.
Yes. But it's all a great learning experience. And I appreciate all the comments and concerns and the feedback. All this is important, being in this role, and we need more of it. Some things can be done, sitting down, just having a conversation. But I get it. People got jobs to do, and people have, people feel certain ways, and it's a tough role to be in. Especially with the 190th. We had a lot going on, but like I said, I appreciate the questions and the concerns and the feedback and the comments from the organizations, and I look forward to working with them. To make life better for all of us in Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. Thank you. Go ahead, Erica.
I have a question. Would you like to highlight any anti-violence organizations that you're working with for people, who may be these violent offenders or who may be at risk or feel pressure to commit acts of violence? Are there organizations and resources that you would like to amplify at this time that people can reach out and get assistance, or talk to, people they can talk to, organizations that are willing to hire folks with colorful backgrounds? You just want to share some resources as we close?
Yeah, so there's several, and I'm still currently getting to know them all, and which organization I'm still learning which organizations are doing the work, and I'm also out here trying to make sure certain organizations get the funding that they deserve, because I know they are boots on the ground, and like earlier, Mr. Mosley mentioned, the funding coming down. We need to make sure the organizations that are boots on the ground, who are out there on these street corners and knocking on the victims' doors and knocking on possible offenders' doors, trying to have conversations to see what their needs are, to see what they're missing, see what they're lacking, to see how they could be supportive. These are the programs and organizations that I'm going to be supporting, and I am currently, doing my research to see who is willing to go above and beyond to get things done. So.
Well, thank you for that. And before we go, can you talk just how can folks get in touch with you? Folks, regardless of what side of the issue that are concerned, about the violence, concerned, about the criminal justice system, concerned about all the issues that you laid out, finding opportunities for young people. How can they get in touch with your office, and get engaged, with the work you're doing, whether they are in Philadelphia or obviously, any legislation that you put forward is going to impact, the entire state. So if there's, folks who are very concerned about these issues across the state, how can they, engage with you?
Yeah. So it's my email address is repamen@pahouse.net. So it's REPAMEN, and my social media handles is repamen, is at repamen, and then we also have Amen Brown PHL. Yeah, so you can send an email or call the office. We're open 5 days a week. And you can check out my website at repamen.com. And there, you know what? I have a survey on my website on repamen.com. It's a public safety and gun violence survey. There's a few questions. It's completely anonymous. So if folks want to go on, and once these surveys are submitted, they come right directly to me. So I done read them almost. I probably read them all except for the ones that came in while I've been on this call. And we have dozens and dozens of people that are completing the survey, and they are, people are being honest. You have some people that say, they're just being upfront and honest. Yeah, you got people who are looking for accountability, and you got people who are looking for programs and organizations to do more. And like I said, I support all of that. So the survey is a great tool for people to let me know how they feel. There's several comment sections, and like I said, I read them all. And we have a whole bunch that came in and that's coming in. And I know that the gun violence thing is a very tough issue, and some might say, I'm a new member, but I've been in my community, serving all my life, so and I agree, it is a tough issue, but we all need to come together to solve this problem, because I believe we can, and I believe that we will.
Thank you for that. And before we let you go, we always have Miracle end us on a positive note, particularly after talking about such a heavy issue for the last better part of 45 minutes or so. So we really appreciate you hanging out with us for a very long segment, on a very heavy issue. So I'm going to give it to Miracle to kind of lift our spirits a bit before we go on our way this Monday evening.
Yes.
You about to sing to me?
Huh?
You about to sing to us?
Oh, no. No, sorry. That would probably put you in an even worse spirit. But no, our question is, we like to, when we have tough conversations, just refocus. What is something that is like bringing you joy, outside of the situation? We try to, outside of like politics, what is something that's like inspiring you, motivating you, and bringing you joy, as T'Challa speaks in the background?
My children and the excitement my constituents get when they see me. They let me know, the energy that I'm receiving from my constituents every single day. We believe that we're headed in the right direction, and my children, when I see my son who looks just like me, it just, just seeing my children just makes me forget about everything that happened earlier in the day, whether it was good or bad. And I just, see my children. I just, I'm just happy that I'm alive and well. And, yeah, so I say my children and my community, that's my happy place in my family.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking some time out to, speak with us here on the Power Hour. I know it took a lot to get here, so I just want to thank you for coming on.
No, thank you. I appreciate it, and I look forward to being back on the show.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. We'll definitely continue this
Thank
conversation.
you.
Thank you for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
And that's State Rep Almond Brown, a freshman legislator from the Philadelphia area, who has been in the news a lot, recently over a state house bill that he has proposed that would reinstitute some mandatory minimums around particularly those who would be convicted of committing violent acts with firearms, and has been all over the news from folks that have been on his side, all the way to the ACLU and the Abolitionist Law Center and other organizations that have been opposed to it. So regardless of what side of the debate you're on, it has been a very spirited debate, and had definitely, as Rep. Brown has attended, it has started quite the conversation around the state of Pennsylvania. We really thank him for joining us tonight to talk about, a very, very controversial issue. So that's another episode of the Power Hour, another legislative visit. Ryan, thanks for all your work, and Miracle for all your work behind the scenes of pulling this together. Yeah, and I guess, Ryan, this will be your final, legislative visit, at least for the interim, until further notice, because you'll be, leaving us next month to pursue your Juris Doctorate, in New York City. So, thank you so much, for all you've done over this last year to help, help build this organization. We built this, basically from scratch over the last year plus. So I just wanted to give you a shout out, for that, and pulling this together, you and Miracle, and reaching out to the representative's office and getting them scheduled and willing to talk to us about these very important issues, and particularly when we can talk to legislators from across the state, and show that we really have a statewide focus, not just Southwestern Pennsylvania, where we do our work at, but particularly when it comes to statewide policy that affects us in all 67 counties. And Miracle, thank you for that reminder. We are a 501c3 advocacy organization committed to building and demonstrating power in Black and Brown communities, and with a particular focus on criminal justice reform and voting rights. You can go to onehoodpower.org and donate, and also check out our brand spanking new website, onehoodpower.org. Really cool. Thanks to Gary for all his fantastic work, and obviously always shout out to producer John for holding us down every Monday night, as well as for the Sunday night sit downs. So Ryan, I don't know if you have anything you want to say, or Miracle.
I'll jump in right quick so Ryan can have the last word. Just remember, next week we are doing we'll be on a hiatus next week, just as we do some strategic planning for the organizations. But a reminder, we want people to register to vote. We still have programming, coming up. On Wednesday, this week in white supremacy. Thursday, we have on Tilt, talking about the state of mental health in Black America. We also want to point out, we understand Black people are not a monolith. We have so many different experiences. And so, last Saturday, we had the conversation of combating gun violence and mass incarceration with Senator Street and Representative Summer Lee. You can watch that program on our Facebook and our YouTube. We understand that all of us, we've all been impacted by gun violence, and this is something that we all care about. And so we want to, just make sure people are coming to these conversations. I do apologize for not putting a trigger warning at the top of the show. But this is something that is going to take all of us to come together and push back. A lot of us that you see passionate fighting on both sides, because people really, really care about these issues. And a lot of times, people are desperate for solutions, and that's why you see some of these legislation being put forward. But as an organization, we are, pushing for the resources and support in our communities. And there are people, returning citizens, returning lifers, who are, available lifeline and resource. So if you are involved in anti-violence work, please make sure you are reaching out to those people who in your communities who are returning home, because they have a love for the community and they're really trying to give back and support and mentor and encourage folks. And, we are still working on this programming. We will be talking to people who've survived shootings, people who have caused shootings. So we're not walking away from this. This is something that is near and dear to our hearts, and as is abolition, as is reducing mass incarceration. So we're still committed to having program. We're still committed to having, tough conversations for people whose views will differ than ours. And so we know that there was a lot of people had a lot of feelings about tonight's conversation. We understand it. We encourage feedback. We encourage critique. And so we won't ever shy away from critique. We won't ever shy away from these conversations. So please, reach out to us. And this is something that we're still going to be talking about, because even just one life loss is too much for us. And so we are still committed to having these conversations and doing what we can to actually stop this, this plague of violence in our communities, and community-based holistic ways and measures. That's our lens, but we understand that's not everyone's. But like I said, that's why we're having these conversations. That's why we're letting people make, informed decisions about the solutions that they want to see. And that's why we're having this conversation. So with that, I'll pass it back to Kahari.
Thank you for that. And being that this is your last legislative visit of your current tenure with One Hood Power, would give it to Ryan to take us out tonight.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kahari. Yeah, as you mentioned, last legislative visit, not last power hour yet. Still got one or two more of those in me, even after we're off next week. But yeah, I just want to first of all to thank you real quick for those kind words a minute ago. Thank both of y'all for bringing me on, letting me learn from y'all and work with y'all over the past year. It's been a great experience on the power hour and otherwise. As you mentioned, thank John and Gary for always holding it down behind the scenes. For as always to our guests for joining us tonight. A really important and productive conversation on a really important and urgent issue, which is why we chose to focus the whole entire month on it. So I'm glad we were able to do that. And then also just thank you to our viewers who continue to tune in every week. And as I mentioned, I'll still be here for a couple more weeks, so y'all aren't quite rid of me yet. But yeah, I'll pass it if any of y'all have anything else to add on top of that.
Thanks so much for that, Ryan. And yeah, we'll definitely make sure that we do a nice, close out episode, at some point in August when we get back, from our retreat next week. And with that, again, I just want to thank Representative Regina Young and State Rep Almond Brown, both freshman legislators from Philadelphia, for joining us, talking about community safety and the work that they're doing. One thing I do want to do is give them both a shout out for being very active freshmen legislators. I think a lot of times it's very easy for freshman legislators to kind of just get lost in the sauce and kind of, just get kind of comfortable and not, push the envelope and, get out there and get active. So props to both of them, for being active and, and being engaged and, working on behalf of their constituencies. So definitely looking forward to continuing these conversations, looking forward to continuing to engage the partners that are, concerned on both sides of the issue. And, we'll definitely be back, sometime this fall or at some point this calendar year, doing a check-in, and we'll definitely closely be following that piece of legislation as well to see, where it goes, or if it, comes back in a different form, based upon, the conversation that it did start. So again, thank you so much to State Rep Regina Young, to State Rep Almond Brown. Look forward to, I guess it will be a replay next Monday. And I guess we'll be back live 2 weeks from today, once we get back from our retreat. So again, on behalf of my co-hosts, Ryan White and Miracle Jones, this is Kahari Mosley signing off on tonight's edition of the One Hood Power Hour, our July legislative visit with Representative Regina Young and Representative Almond Brown. So thank you so much. And we will see you live in 2 weeks, but next week we'll have a replay for you. Definitely tune in. Talk to you soon. Stay safe, stay engaged, stay involved in the process. Remember to register to vote. We still got an election November 2nd. Take care. Have a good night.